Hello again, it's me, Dan, and I am back at Clore Leadership Pulse this week. So we are back in Norton Park in Sutton, Scotland, and we are beginning the second of three Clore Leadership Pulse residentials. So slightly shorter week this time. We're just doing Tuesday afternoon until Friday rather than the full Monday to Friday weeks. So we are just settling back into the whole kind of Clore environment and reconnecting with each other. So first things first, it's really nice to be back in this place. It's really nice to be back with this group of people. One of the things I think has been a really good thing about Pulse, certainly with regards to talking to other people who've done it previously, is the fact that we have these three separate times of residential, a break for a bit, residential, a break for another bit, another residential. Previously having been a 2-week block that's just kind of connected one after the other with a little break in the weekend if you want it. I think it's nice to have had a chance to go away, kind of put some learning into action and work and have a bit of time to reflect and then come back and think about it again. That's been really positive. It's also really good, I think, in terms of the relationship building we've had as a cohort, the fact that we have been in contact in the interim period. So there's a kind of WhatsApp group going and an email chain going, people just to kind of check in. There's the usual kind of social media connection of people following each other on Twitter and retweeting and stuff, and just generally people just like checking in and saying hello. And there's been in-person connections, people who live close by and stuff. That's really nice that this has not just been an intensive block for people and then you might see them again in passing later on. The fact that we've had a chance to all get to keep in contact, that the opportunity exists before we come back together again is really nice. So that's been lovely. And then actually getting back in a room again together this week has been great. When arriving, kind of even prior to arriving, we had taxi sharing stuff going on, which we didn't really have last time. That was kind of facilitated by Clore, but the fact that we could sort it ourselves and kind of knew people and say how's it all going and check in was really nice. So we arrived in Norton Park. We had a little bit of time to just settle in and to kind of catch up, have a brew and whatnot, and then we got back into the session, into the room. We did a check-in, and it's something that is really good because actually something that I think is more commonplace these days, particularly in the cultural sector. I find it a lot that companies, artists, employers, for meetings quite often will do a bit of a kind of check-in at the beginning of that conversation, just seeing how everybody is, where their heads are at, what they're feeling, what they're thinking. It allows everyone to kind of address where they're at when they come into the room. Sometimes it might be addressing elephants in the room, but it just means that everyone has an understanding of where people are, kind of emotionally, intellectually, whatever, before you get into the kind of nuts and bolts of what's really going on. And I think that's really valuable because last time we did Pulse, none of us knew each other. None of us had had a chance to meet properly and certainly hadn't been on any part of this process. So I think that, I don't know if necessarily apprehension is the right word, but I think there'd be a sense of people maybe being slightly guarded and not being entirely sure what the process was going to be like and what the group were going to be like. So I think that having this check-in today was really nice because everyone's got to know each other a little bit. It's a very safe space and a very trusting group of people, so everyone could be quite honest really about where they were at and what's been going on, how they're feeling, and that's a great way to start this process of being able to be truthful with people. Often in meetings you go in and you're aware of an expectation of what's going to happen in that meeting, and sometimes you feel like you have to present in a certain way and you have to behave in a certain way and you have to speak to a certain degree or not speak to a certain degree. And that sometimes kind of belies a lack of trust in a conversation or with a group, or a lack of honesty and openness. And we didn't have that as a group. So that's really nice. People were quite open and honest about where they've been. There was generally a sense that I think people were also quite glad to be back in that group of people. One of the questions was, what's your energy level like? And a lot of people were saying, my energy level's gone up since getting back in the room with these people because it's such a nice place to be. And we understand the context in which we're all there. So that was really nice. And we had that kind of check-in, and then we did a little walk and talk where we followed on the final walk and talk we did in the last residential, thinking about what did we want to try and change, what were the challenges we were looking at, and reflecting on that, and did we act on that since last time. I personally had kind of forgotten the stuff that I'd said last time, and I felt bad about it at first, but actually once I had a little prompt from the other person that I was talking with, and remembered what it was that I'd kind of said in terms of my challenge and stuff, I recognised that I have actually acted on it. I think subconsciously. I think it's something that was in my mind from the course of the thing I wanted to try and do differently and change. I think I've done it. I think I've been doing it since being back in real life. So, that's been quite interesting to see that I was doing it subconsciously. But also that I kind of forgot about it, because there's so much that you do. Like, your brain is just literally taking in information all the time in Clore. And it was okay to forget that stuff because we've learned so much. But then actually, like I said, when reflecting back on it, having had a little reminder, I have been addressing that issue and thinking about that challenge. So that's been really nice. That was a really nice kind of moment to go, okay, getting back into it, and the learning has already had an impact on me moving forward. So that was cool. So we had that, and then we had a talk from Nick Merriman from the Horniman, and it was a kind of leadership perspectives thing, talking about his journey and the lessons he's learned. He's a former Clore participant. He's Clore 1, first group, 15 years ago. So it was quite fascinating to hear from his experience how Clore helped him, and some really interesting things that he presented in terms of like authentic leadership. He's driven by this idea of kind of equity and access with regards to culture. He works in the kind of museum and heritage service and believes that everyone should have access to those things, and it shouldn't be restricted by kind of structural barriers in terms of economics or geography or a level of attainment. And that's a really nice thing to hear from somebody in a leadership position, is saying it should be for everyone. It's a bit like the Arts Council Great Art for Everyone principle, which is really nice. But he also recognises the kind of the structural barriers that exist, but also it's about self-exclusion as well. He talked about Pierre Bourdieu's kind of philosophy about people do self-exclude, and it happens a lot in the cultural sector. I come from Plymouth. I come from a working class background. My family are not culturally engaged, whatever that means, but they aren't the people who naturally occupy spaces in museums, in galleries, in theatres. And there is a thing about, I think, socioeconomically, people from more deprived backgrounds do exclude, they self-exclude because they don't think those spaces are for them. There's a thing about cultural spaces being more for middle class audiences and more privileged audiences. So Nick was kind of recognising from his own work that there's those challenges and trying to think about how he could address them and make changes. And, from his stories that he was telling about his career, he's put his principles into what he's been doing. He's not shied away from the challenge of doing that stuff because it's what's important to him and it's authentic leadership. And he talked a lot about some of the various things that he's done and the challenges that have existed, but kind of not shying away from those challenges. His belief about investing in leadership as well, of not just for himself, but for the other people he might work with. And just kind of looking at my notes here, quite often there is a perception of leadership. You need to be a paragon of virtue. You need to be the person who leads everything and does everything. And that's not necessarily true. Quite often it's about collaborative leadership. It's about having a person who is encouraging, supporting, facilitating other people. It's a thing about giving space and all that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of those things that I recognise in my own style of leadership, of being generous like that and trying my best to. And, I know, like everyone does, you don't always get it right, but that principle is there that drives you forward. So one of the things that he learned on his first Clore course was basically 2 bits of great advice: to be yourself and to build relationships. And that's really valuable learning. There's a lot of times in your career where you feel like you need to be somebody else. You need to kind of like look upwards and look at the behavior of other people and try and mimic that behavior. And also the relationship thing is about also having trusting relationships and having the people you can kind of pick up the phone to and have a chat with and get advice and stuff. And that kind of partnership working, it's all really valuable kind of lessons to learn. And just, there's so many things that he was kind of presenting that certainly spoke to me in terms of what I'm looking at in terms of my leadership style. And it is, one of the nice things about this course is those are kind of, dare I say, slightly more passive sessions, because we're not driving the content and the agenda of those sessions. We're listening, but we're being receptive. We're active listening in those sessions. We're listening to those stories of people who have things to share with us. I wouldn't say teach us necessarily, because that implies that we need to be taught. And I don't think it's about that. I think it's about having another perspective. Leadership perspectives is the kind of title of those sessions. And I think perspective is really important. It's not about leadership teaching, it's leadership perspectives. So you can put your own leadership style in kind of relativity to their leadership style. So that's really nice. And we've got a few of those happening during the course of the week. And, tomorrow we'll get into the proper learning zone where we do the things, and that's going to be quite nice to be back in that place. But yeah, I mean, it's a very nice, gentle easing back into it, really. But yeah, I mean, one of the things that we were asked at the beginning of the session today when we were checking in was, what's the thing that you're kind of thinking of? What's a question or a challenge that you're looking at moving forward? And for me, one of the things has been momentum. Part of that is because I felt like I took an awful lot away from the last residential, and I'm very conscious that quite often you do these kind of things and then you go out of the bubble that you're in, and you kind of in this bubble, and you step out of the bubble, and all the learning that you've done here doesn't get put into practice over here. It just lives in a weird space over here that just is like, oh, maybe one day I'll draw upon that, and you lose momentum about that. So I want to make sure that the kind of energy and learning and I guess level of kind of increased confidence in my own leadership abilities that I took away from the last Pulse course, that again, I keep that moving forward. I keep my momentum building. So it's quite often easy to be in a situation like this and then go back to your day-to-day life and fall back into your old routines and old habits, and all the positive stuff that you've learned that for yourself and for the other people you know and work with can be lost. And that's a really important thing, to not lose that. So that's my big thing this week, I guess, is about how to keep the momentum, how to keep that going and moving forward. So we'll see how that goes. Hopefully, by the end of the week, the momentum has kept going that way, and then post the week, that momentum keeps going, moving forward, going back into work and back into life and stuff. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. I will keep you posted. Maybe the momentum could just be to do these kind of videos. Who knows? Have terrible momentum for this stuff normally, but yeah, it's nice to be back in this kind of place of learning, and nice to be back with this group of people who are also lovely and generous and kind and friendly. And it's nice to have this opportunity. Really grateful to Clore for taking me on the course. Really grateful for Barbican Theatre, for my employer, for letting me do this and supporting me in doing it. It means an awful lot that I get to do stuff like this, and also I kind of hope that some of this stuff is useful for anybody who watches these videos, whether it's about, I'd like to do Clore, what is it all about? Or just going, what can I know a bit more about leadership styles? What does Dan have to say about leadership styles? Is there anything valuable that's in there? Maybe there is. Maybe what I say actually makes you go, I disagree with that and I think differently. But yeah, that's part of the thing about doing these videos, is not just keeping it to myself, but being able to shout out there a little bit. So, but yeah, I mean, that all being said, you want to do the course yourself, because it's far more impressive than these videos will ever be. You'll get far more out of doing Clore than just watching these videos. But I will keep posting videos this week to give you an insight into what's going on. So yeah, I will let you know what's happening. Hopefully it will continue to be a valuable and learning experience. I'm sure it will be. And hopefully I can keep giving some insights into stuff, and then I'll be able to look back on this in a few years' time and go, oh, that's where that moment for me happens, that light bulb moment happens. So yeah, relatively comfortable easing in today to the whole Clore Leadership Pulse residential, and I guess momentum will continue to move forward, which is great in terms of my own reflection. So yeah, tomorrow, probably full day, getting back into it. But yes, for now, I will check out for the night, and I will speak to you tomorrow. Thank you very much for watching.